Hope you're all doing well. Today, we're going to be learning Daf Tzadi Hey Amid Beis and Tzadi Vav Amid Aleph. We're going to be behind for one more day. And then tomorrow, which is Tuesday, on Tuesday, if you take a look with me, you'll see it's not so bad. On Tuesday, we're going to do Tzadi Vav Amid Beis, Tzadi Zayin Amid Aleph, and Tzadi Zayin Amid Beis. It was a little easier to truncate this week because Sunday was crazy with, thank God, graduations and some other good stuff, ice cream. I don't know, a whole bunch of stuff happened. We are right now in the middle of a very unique sugya, a nuance within the responsibilities of a shomer. And then we're going to go into the nuance of the nuance. And that's what we're going to be spending much of our day on. And just to give us the right context, if you have the psukim inside your Gemara, there's a pasuk in Sefer Shmos, Perek Chav Beis, pasuk Yud Daled, that is the bedrock of today's conversation. The pasuk reads, "Im be'alav imo," if you are a shomer and you borrow from someone, and the master who owned the item is with you, lo yeshalem. Then while you're with him, if the animal dies or if the animal gets injured, you're pater. And then the pasuk says, it's actually another pasuk right above that says, if ba'alav einimo shalem yeshalem. If the owners are not there, then you do pay. So let's just talk about it outside, and then we'll jump into this machlokas amoraim. It appears, says the Gemara, it says the Torah, that if you are a shomer, and when you rent your item, you're with its owner, you'll be pater for shvura umesa. You'll be pater if the animal gets injured or dies. But if the owner is not with you, then you'll be chayiv. That's where the Gemara picks up. We're 4 lines into the wide lines at the bottom of Tzadi Hey Amid Aleph. We'll jump into this machlokas amoraim. I understand, says the Gemara, by shvura v'mesa, if the bailim are with me, then I'm pater. That I understand. But the Gemara wants to know, pshia b'bailim, what if I borrow from you and I borrow you? I borrow your tractor and I borrow you to drive your tractor. But I was poshea. I took a sledgehammer to the back of the plow and I broke it. So says the Gemara, what's the deal with that? Pshia b'bailim, that's pliki bar of acha b'ravina. In order to have total clarity on the case of pshia b'bailim, let's take a look at Rashi, which is 3 lines into the wide lines of Rashi. Pshia b'bailim, echad mina shomrim shepashak shahayu bailav b'malachto. So again, I rent your John Deere tractor and I rent you to drive it, but I was poshea with your tractor. So there, the Gemara wants to know, the bailim are with you. So the Torah said if the bailim are with you, you're pater by shvura v'mesa. What would happen if it was pshia? So the Amoraim argue about this. Chad Amar Chayev. One says that even though the bailim are there, you're chayev. We could easily follow the rationale, which is that you're a poshea, and regular shmira has no protections from pshia, even if the bailim are present. And Chad Amar Pater, and one says that you are pater because the bailim are there, even though it's a pshia. And now let's go through the shitas, and this is a difficult chunk of Gemara. Manda Amar Chayev. According to the shita that says that the bailim are chayiv if they're poshea, even when the shomer is that the shomer are chayiv with pshia, even when the bailim are there. That's because kasavar mikra nidrash lefanav v'lo lifnei panav. You're allowed to take a pasuk and darshan it to the pasuk before, but not 2 pasukim before. We've seen this principle before. You can look on the side here. We saw it in Maseches Shabbos, an oldie but a goodie. I'm allowed to make a drush on pasuk gimel and apply it to pasuk beis, but not to pasuk aleph. So mikra nidrash lefanav v'lo lifnei panav. So hilkach, when the pasuk says im be'alav imo, when the pasuk says that, that's Shmos Kaf Beis Yud Daled, that's Ashomer Chinam Loksi. It doesn't go back 2 psukim to pasuk Yud Beis, which was talking about Ashomer Chinam. Upshia nami b'shomer sachar v'shoel Loksi. And pshia is not written expressly in the Torah by a shomer sachar or a shoel. Hilkach, b'shomer sachar u'v'shoel l'chiyuv. When it comes to a shomer sachar and to a shoel where there's a chiyuv by pshia, we actually learned that asya b'kal v'chomer b'shomer chinam of all places. Aval b'bailim, but when there are bailim, says the Gemara, liftor, that's only true in certain cases. Af b'shomer sachar u'v'shoel lo. We wouldn't have said that by shomer sachar and shoel. So that's where the shita holds that you're going to be chayiv. In my time, well, why wouldn't we say that? Because kiksivim be'alav imo lo yeshalem. When the pasuk says in Chumash that if your the owner of the John Deere tractor that you borrowed is with you, that you don't pay, that's ashol v'ashomer sachar. We're only dealing with things that are explicit in the Torah, which is shiur v'mesa. But pshia, which is not explicit in the Torah, no. So therefore, basically, we're just putting a limit on the pasuk according to this approach. The pasuk says that if the bailam are present, you're pater, and we're saying, yeah, that's true by shiur v'mesa because those are explicit in the Torah. But by pshia, which is not explicit in the Torah, halacha is that you'd be chayiv. And that is a difficult approach, but the approach of one of these Amoraim. And 4 lines from the bottom of the page, Tzadi Hey Amid Aleph, the Gemara now turns to the next shita. Man de Amar Pater, what about the shita that says that if I rent the John Deere tractor, and I rent you, the owner of that John Deere tractor, and I was poshea that I'm still Pater, what's the svara? Well, he's the other side of the lumdus that we saw in the first shita. Kasavar mikra nidrash lefanav v'lifnei fanav. What we learned in the pasuk of im be'alav imo lo yeshalem, if the master is there, that you're pater, we go back 2 psukim even to shomer chinam. V'chiksiv im be'alav imo ashomer chinam namiksiv. It applies to the earlier shita as well. So this is the machlokas amoraim between Rav Acha and Ravina. I believe it's Rav Acha and Ravina. Let me just double check. Yeah, Rav Acha and Ravina. So now the Gemara is going to ask a question or two. The Gemara wants to know as follows. Tanan, we have a Mishnah. A Mishnah we've seen already. So I rent your cow, and I rent you, the owner of the cow. And or I borrow your cow and rent you. Or shal ba'aleha, or if I borrow you, o sacharan, or hire you. And only later, sha'al hapara umesa, we say pater. Ve'ilu, what's missing in this Mishnah? Shomer chinam lo ktani. We see that shomer chinam is not there. So if shomer chinam is not there, l'chora, the rules are different. That therefore seems to say that when it comes to the case, certain cases you'd be chayiv, in certain cases you'd be pater, and therefore you'd be pater by shomer sachar, and by you'd be pater by shomer sachar, but not by shomer chinam. So that's a problem with one of the shitas that we saw. And to this, the Gemara responds, that's not a good svara. The Gemara says, according to you, guess what else is not brought in the Mishnah? Shomer Sachar Miktani. Doesn't say Shomer Sachar either. So you can't tell me a diuk about Shomer Chinam when it also doesn't say anything about Shomer Sachar. So therefore, the Gemara says on the last 3 words of Sadi Hamad Aleph, Elatana, the Brisa, the Mishnah, the author of our Mishnah says, Tana Milsa Dechsiva Behedja Ktani. The Asya Midrasha Loktani. So let's use Rashi to guide us through these words. We said that anything that's written explicitly in the Torah, that's taught in our Mishnah. What does Rashi say? The pasuk talks openly about a shoel. So therefore, Ktani Masnisim Bebailim Pater. Therefore, the Mishnah would say in such a case, you're Pater. But the Asya Midrasha, that which is learned from a drasha, and Rashi says, She'ar Shomrim. Therefore, that's everything else. That's shomer chinam, shomer sachar, and socher loktani. That's left out of the Mishnah. So therefore, you try to ask on one of our shitas, but you can't ask because your question is not a good question. It's basically what the Gemara says. Let's try a second question on these 2 shitas. Again, the machlokes Rav Acha and Ravina is that if I rent your John Deere tractor and I rent it with you, you're the owner, and then I was poshea, do we say that the heter that the Torah builds in, that when the bailam are with you, that you're pater? Does that apply in a case of pshia as well? So Tashma, let's see. This is a Tosefta over here in this parak of Bava Metzia. Sha'ala v'sha'al ba'ala ima. If I borrow your animal and borrow you with your animal, we're going to go through all the permutations of renting and borrowing. Sachra v'sachar ba'aleima. If I rent your animal and rent you. Sha'ala v'sachar ba'ala. If I borrow the animal and rent you ima. And lastly, sechara v'shal ba'aleima, I rent your animal and borrow you. In all of these 4, and there only are 4 permutations in this case, even if the bailim are working elsewhere and the animal dies, pater. So we have to figure out what is the question. We don't know yet. Savruha, what are we thinking at this point? Hamani, this is the sheet of Rabbi Yehuda, that a shomer sachar is that a damar socher kishomer sachar dami, that a socher and a shomer sachar are the same. Wait 1 second, says the Gemara. V'hai tana de katani milsa de asimi drasha. If what you're saying is that the socher is like a shomer sachar, and this Mishnah is talking even about a shomer sachar, now you're discussing a case in the Mishnah that comes about from a drasha, not shoah, which is explicit. It's a drasha, which is shomer sachar. V'ilu shomer chinam lo ktani. Yes, you added shomer sachar, but why then aren't you also including shomer chinam? You said on the top of the page that the chsiva behedja ktani, the Mishnayos, the Brisas, they all are talking about cases that are explicit in Chumash, which is the case of Shoah. But if the Bris is going to include the case of Shomer Sachar, it should also include the case of Shomer Chinam. So a couple of answers. The Gemara says, Hamani, Reb Meir Hida Amar Socher Kishomer Chinam Dami. One answer is that really this Brisa, this Tosefta, is also talking about a Shomer Chinam. And the Brisa is not like Rabbi Yehuda, but it's like Reb Meir. And because Reb Meir holds that a socher is kishomer chinam dami, the rules would be the same by shomer chinam as they would for anything else. And vitana shomer chinam, b'hu adin l'shomer sachar, the rules would be the same for everything. Iba yisema, perhaps we can say that a taka is like Rabbi Yehuda. K'demachlif Rabba bar Avua. I think this is the third time we're seeing this. Vitani, we learned that there was a reversal, a potential reversal in the name of Rabba bar Avua of the machlokes between Reb Meir and Rabbi Yehuda about the equivalence of a socher. Is a socher similar to a shomer chinam, comparing it to a lower level of achrayas, or is a socher compared to a shomer sachar, the higher level of achrayas? And to this, the Gemara shows the different version. We're about 10 lines down, middle of the line, Vitani. Socher keitzad mishalim. How does a socher, what are his obligations if he is a shomer and something happens? Reb Meir Omer, he's kishomer sachar, and Rabbi Yehuda Omer kishomer chinam. So one way or the other, whether or not we say that the Brisa, the Tosefta is like Reb Meir, or if we say like the Tosefta is like the alternate version of Reb Yehuda, one way or the other, your question falls apart. For the next 20 lines, we're going to be analyzing this line of Rav Hamnuna, and we're going to reject it. We're a quarter of the way down on Sadi Hey Amid Beis, heading to the very last line of Sadi Vav Amid Aleph. Amar Rav Hamnuna, in regards to this din, that if I borrow you and your animal, that I'm pater for shvura umesa, what is the scope of when this actually applies? So says the Gemara, Amar Rav Hamnuna, La'olam hu chayiv ad shetehei para v'choresh ba. There needs to be a cow that's plowing. Chamor umechamer achareha. There needs to be a donkey and the owner is helping. Ve'ad shu ba'ila mishas she'ela ad shashvura umesa. Rav Hamnuna has a mechudesh lekadin that when it comes to the heter of the Torah, that when the bailam are present, you're pater. That's only true if the bailam are there from the time of the she'ela to the time of the shvura umesa. That's a very big chumrah. Whatever. It's very odd. That's basically what it is. Alma, what do we see from this presentation of Rav Hamnuna? The Gemara says 5 lines before the wide lines. Alma kasavar bailavimo akula milsa mashma. It seems from Rav Hamnuna that the din of the heter of the Torah, that you're pater when the bailam are present, that means that you have to be there the whole time. You, the bailam, have to be there the whole time, which implies that if the bailam ditch for 10 minutes, there is no pater. There is no heter for shvura mesa, even if the bailam are there. Again, we're just trying to really understand the scope of the pasuk. So to this, we're going to ask a kasha. The Gemara says, Masiv Rava, and this is the same Tosefta we saw a moment ago. And it goes through all 4 permutations, again, of borrowing and renting from an owner. Sha'ala v'sha'al ba'ala'ima. I borrow the animal and borrow you, the owner of the animal. Or sachara v'sachar ba'ala'ima. I rent the animal and I rent you. And now we cross them. Sachara, I rent the animal. V'sha'al ba'ala'ima. And I borrow you. Sha'ala v'sachar ba'ala'ima, or I borrow the animal and rent you, all 4 permutations as discussed. Afal pisha ha'bailim osin malacha b'makom acher umesa, even if the bailim did malacha elsewhere, so then you're pater. So this is a very unique piece of Gemara because my lav v'malacha acheres. We just said that the din of Rav Hamnuna is that the bailim have to be there the whole time. But the Tosefta says that even if you're b'makom acher, you're pater. So which one is it? Do we say that the bailim have to be exactly in the same spot as me, the borrower, right? I rent your John Deere tractor and I rent you. I rent your cow and I rent you, and you're with me the whole time. That's what Rav Hamnuna says. Or no, afilu b'makom acher, you're still going to be patur. The Torah's leniency that the Bailam's presence will create a patur for the shomer applies, even if the guy is b'makom acher, even if you, the owner, are b'makom acher. So on the first long line of Tzadi Hamid Beis, the Gemara says, "Lo, perhaps it's ba'osa malacha." Says the Gemara, if it's ba'osa malacha, then what did the Tosefta mean? After all, elamai makom acher. The Tosefta was clear that if it's makom acher, then you're still going to be pater. What does makom acher mean? Rav Hamnuna, how can you be right? Rav Hamnuna wanted to say that in order for the Torah's leniency to apply, that if the Bailim are present, you're pater legamre by shvura mesa, they have to be there the whole time. How does Rav Hamnuna understand this brisa that says that the guy can be b'makom acher? So says the Gemara, that what the owner is doing is he's a little bit ahead, just 10 feet ahead, 15 feet ahead. And what he's doing is he's taking, I don't know what it's called, one of these tools that pokes holes in the ground, an aerator. Right? And he's just poking holes just to prep the ground a little bit. I don't know specifically what he's doing, but just conceptually. So yeah, I'm working, let's say my father and I are working together. I'm 15 feet in front, making the ground a little softer. So if I'm the owner, and he's the borrower, that's still considered b'chad shachya, that's still considered one heter. Says the Gemara, you can't say that. You can't say that when we say that it's b'makom acher, that it means it's the kamerape v'azil kama, that I, the owner, am going ahead of you, the borrower, and just softening the ground. Why not? Because, says the Gemara, halfway down on Tzadi Hayim Beis, Bami the Seifa al Gaba Have, in the end of the Tosefta, where the case is that the two of them are in the same exact spot, the love and the malve, Resha must be b'malacha acheres. It must be that they're not in the same spot by diuk. After all, the katani seifa. What does the seifa write? Says the Gemara, she'ela ve'achar kach sho'al be'aleha. Let's say that we don't rent things at the same time. In the seifa, I borrow the animal, and only later do I borrow you. They're not at the same time. Or sechara ve'achar kach sachar be'aleha ima. Or I rent the animal, and only later do I rent you. Af al pisha bailam chorshin al gabav umesa. Even if the bailam are standing in the same spot, chayiv. So therefore, the resha cannot be talking about where they're in the same place. It has to be mamish b'makom acher in a totally different place. It says the Gemara, really, amrei resha v'seifa ba'osa malacha, the resha revusa kamash malon, v'seifa revusa kamash malon. Really, when it comes to this brisa, this Tosefta, there's a Resha and a Seifa, and really both of them are discussing where the borrower and the borrowed are dealing with the same exact malacha, and there's a Chiddush in the Resha. That's what Revusa means. We add something new in the Resha, and there's also a Chiddush in the Seifa. It says the Gemara a little bit more than halfway down, almost 2/3 of the way down. Resha Revusa Kamash Malon. What do we learn in the Resha when the Bailim were hired at the same time as the animal or borrowed at the same time? The Afal Gab, the Lav al Gaba, that even though they weren't in the exact same spot, El Ba'os Malacha, right? That was the Ukimta where I'm working 15 feet in front of my father. Kevan Dahavu Bailim B'Shas She'ela, because the Bailim were there at the time of the loan, you're pater. Okay, that's a nice chiddush. That makes sense. We have a little bit of a quirk, a little bit of a twist. And the Sefer Revusa Kamash Malan, the end of the Tosefta, also teaches me a chiddush. The Afal Gav de Al Gaba, that even though you and I are standing in the same spot, shoveling the same little dalet amos of dirt, Kevan de Lo Hayu Bailim B'Shas She'elachayim, that if the Bailim weren't there at the time of the actual loan, then we don't have the leniency of the Torah. Namely, according to this approach, the moment in time that enables the ptur of me being pater while I watch your animals, even if I am poshea. So the Gemara says that only applies where you, the lender, were there at the time of the loan. So says the Gemara, hi man, what's going on here? I don't understand. If you want to say that the Resha was talking about where I was doing a different malacha, not the same, v'seifa ba'osa malacha, so then hainu revusa, then I can understand. That means that the Resha and the Seifa have what to teach. Ela'i amers Resha v'seifa ba'osa malacha. If they're both teaching the same exact case, then why do I need the Reisha and the Seifa? My Revusa, Idi v'Idi v'osam alacha habe. The only time that there's going to be a chiddush between the Reisha and the Seifa is if we say that the Reisha is dealing with a different case than the Seifa. Otherwise, there's no point in repeating the cases. The Odin, furthermore, so says the Gemara, we're almost halfway through the wide lines on Tzadi Hamid Beis. Mimash Moshe Ne'emar, if we analyze the psukim carefully, let's take a look. What does the pasuk say? Im be'alav imo lo yeshalem, that if I, the worker, if I'm the borrower and you're the borrowed, I have your cow and you're helping me and you're with me, so then lo yeshalem, I'm pater from paying in cases of shvur o mesa and potentially even in cases of pshia. Eini yodea, can't I make a diuk on my own? She'im be'alav ein imo shalem yeshalem. Why does the pasuk have to speak out both halves? We're smart people. If the Torah says that when the Bailam are with you, you're pater, well, then what do you think the halacha would be if the Bailam weren't with you? Obviously, it would be that you're chayav. Why then does the next pasuk speak about be'alav einimo? So it says the Gemara, it's actually the previous pasuk. It says the Gemara, lomar lach, haya imo b'shas she'eva, that if when I borrowed, you were present, ein tzarich liyos imo b'shas shvur u'mesa, then even had you not been with me at the time that your animal got injured or died, I would still be pater. What the Torah means when it says that it's bailav imo, that's at the time of the she'ela. Haya imo b'shas shvur u'mesa. But if you were only with me b'shas shvura o mesa, then tzarich liosimo b'shas sheila, then that would not work. I would not be pater unless you were there by shas sheila. So this is the second raya that Rav Hamnun is wrong. And here's the third one, which will kabash his shita and just knock it out of the water. B'tanya idach, we have another brisa, very similar to the previous one. Mimashma shenemar ba'alav ein imo shalem yishalem. This is the reverse argument that we just saw. Because the pasuk in Shemos Kafez Yud Gimel says that if the Bailam are not there, then you're going to be chayev. The Torah's heter of me as a shomer being pater doesn't apply when the Bailam are not there. Eini yodea shim Bailav imo lo yeshalem. I'm a smart guy. I don't need you to teach it to me. I know that therefore, if the Bailam are there, I'm pater. What then does the pasuk in pasuk Yud Dal come to teach me that if the Bailam are there, I am pater. Lomar lach kevan shiyatzas merishus mashil sha'achas b'bailam umesa pater. Says the Gemara, since it left the rishus of the lender for 1 hour and it's now in the possession of the bailam, that there's going to be a tour to yufta the Rav Hamnuna to yufta. We wanted to say, and I'll just summarize the last 20 lines in 30 seconds. Rav Hamnuna wanted to say that in order for the Torah's leniency to apply, that a shomer will be pater when the bailam are present, it's only true if they were present at the she'ela, at the borrowing. If they weren't present at that time and they only showed up after the fact, even if they missed it by 10 seconds, so then the Torah's din of ba'alav imo lo yeshalem is no longer applicable. So we reject the shita of Rav Hamnuna and we accept this more practical version, or I should say more halachic version, that the only time that the din in the pasuk of ba'alav imo lo yeshalem is when the bailam are present at the she'ela. That brings us back to an old conversation. Yesterday we were debating when it says shvura o mesa as to how we understand the word o. We saw yesterday machlokes Rav Yoshia and Rav Nasan. So we're going to Rav Yonasan. We're now going to take that approach and apply it to another space. The Gemara says 7 lines from the bottom on Tzadi Hayamid Beis. Abaye savar la Rav Yoshia umetaretz lekroy Rav Yoshia. Abaye understood Pshat in the Sugya like Rav Yoshia and the Psukim as well. And Rava, so Machlokas Abaye Rava, they're party lines to Rav Yoshia and Rav Yonasan. Rava Savar Laka Rav Yonasan and Mataretz Lekrai Rav Yonasan. So now let's go through each shita to see how we can understand each shita. Let's remember that we're comparing this back to the function, the operator word of the word o, Vinishbara o mesa. Is it literally or, in which case it's either or does it mean vi, and? Let's see. Abaye savrlaka Rav Yoshi matarz lekrai Rav Yoshia. What does this mean? Let's analyze. Bailav einimo shalem yishalem. The pasuk says in Kaf Beis Yud Gimel that if there are no bailim there, you're chayiv. If something happens, if there's shvura umesa taima, the lesse betarvayu. That is perhaps because he wasn't there at the time of the loan. However, what would imply from that part of the pasuk is that if you were there for even one part, you the bailim, if you were present for even one part, then I the shomer would be pater, because based on the diuk from the pasuk, it implies that you have to be there for at least one part. However, the next part of the pasuk reads v'haksiv, and here we have a little bit of a girsa change. Uksiv, not a big difference. The word v'ha should be erased. Uksiv, when the pasuk says in ba'alav imo lo yeshalim, that when he's with you, you should be mishalim. That's time of the isebet harvaihu. That might have been true with both. However, there's opposite inferences. We have this type of question, this style of question, when the Reisha and the Seifa of a Mishnah have opposite implications. But here, the opposite implications are still in Chumash. Why? Because Pasuk Chav Gimel, Pasuk Yud Gimel says that Bailav Ein Imo Shalim Yeshalim. And the other Pasuk says the opposite of Bailav Imo Lo Yeshalim. And the inferences are opposite. So how do we figure this out? So the Gemara responds, 2 lines from the bottom of Tzadi Hayamid Beis. Lomar Lach, Haya Imo B'Shas She'ela. Had it been that the Bailim were present at the time that I borrowed, if I'm borrowing your John Deere and you're present, so then Eino Tzarech Lios Imo B'Shas Shvuro Mesa, like we said as we rejected Rav Hamnuna. So then the Gemara says that I, the Shomer, will still be pater if you were only present at the Shvuro, if you were only present at the She'ela, even if you weren't present at the Shvuro Mesa. Haya imo b'shas shvuro mesa, that still doesn't work. Tzarech lios imo b'shas she'ela, same as before. Abaye basically explained away the opposite inferences in the psukim to match our approach that we saw as we rejected Rab Hamnuna. So now we're doubling down. We see another shita that indicates that the way we view the pasuk of that the bailim were present and therefore I the shomer is pater. Why would that be? That's true only if the bailim were there for the shas she'ela. And Rava on the top of Tzadi Vavam and Aleph, when we get to the halfway mark of the page, we're going to ask a dozen questions in a row. It's not going to end in teku like it normally does, but would have made things a little easier. But still, a couple of just beautiful questions. But let's get there. And on the top of Tzadi Vavam and Aleph, Rava Savar Laka Rabbi Yonasan and Mataritz L'Krai Rabbi Yonasan. How did Rava understand the previous machlokas of Yoshia and Rav Yonasan? So the Gemara says as follows. The Tanya, we have a brisa. Im ba'alav imo lo yeshalim. When the pasuk says that the bailim are present, that the shomer doesn't have to pay in a case of shvura umesa, mashma de'isei betarvayu. That might be the case if they're present for both. If the bailim are there for both, that's when we say lo yeshalim. Umashma nami dechi isei bechada v'lese bechada pater. It seems to imply that you'd be pater even if they were there from one, meaning we can learn the pasuk both ways, meaning it's not clear as to how to learn the pasuk. Uchsiv, the next part of the pasuk is also true, that ba'alav ein imo shalem yeshalem. How do we read that part of the pasuk? So this too can be read in 2 ways. He doesn't agree to the approach of Abaye, to the approach of Rav Yoshia. He agrees to a totally different approach. Rav Yoshi would have said that there's a diuk to be made here, and Rav Yonasan is not saying that way. Mashma, 5th line, delese betarvayu umashmanami dechi ise bechada v'lese bechada. This is very similar to the machlokas that we saw yesterday between Rav Yoshia and Rav Yonasan in regards to the word o. When it says shvura o mesa, do we say that shvura o mesa implies either or does it imply both? So yesterday we saw machlokas where Rav Yoshia said it implies either or. And we saw that the shita of Rav Yonasan was that it could imply both. And we're seeing the same exact machlokas here between Rava and Abaye as it relates to the shitas of Rav Yonasan and Rav Yoshia. So says the Gemara, 5th line, 6th line, Mashma delese betarvai, mashma nami dechi ise bechada v'lese bechada chay. So how do we understand the stira? The implication stira that Rava parses out within the frame of the pre-existing sheet of Rav Yonasan. The Gemara says, Lomar loch hayim b'shas she'ela. If the bailim were present when I, the shomer, hired them or borrowed them, then ein tzarich liyosi mo b'shas shvura u'meisa. As long as they're there for the she'ela, we're good to go. Haya imo b'shas shvura u'meisa tzarich liyosi mo b'shas she'ela. So this is what the Gemara does. Again, a very sophisticated comparison. We saw yesterday that the word "o" by Shvura O Mesa was a machlokes Rav Yoshia and Rav Yonasan, because we saw that Rav Yoshia was of the opinion that the word "o" was a categorical operator word. It's or, it's not and. However, Rav Yonasan said, I could read the pasuk in both ways. We see the same exact machlokes over here when we read the psukim about Bailav Ein Imon, Bailav Imon. Uniquely, while there is a machlokas Abai and Rava how to darshan the psukim, the conclusion is exactly the same. What's the conclusion? Against Rav Hamnuna. Rav Hamnuna wanted to say that the bailim have to be present both by the she'ela, by the moment of borrowing, and by the shvura umesa, that when I, the shomer, am watching your animal, we would have thought that you have to be present for both. However, that's not true. Both Abai and Rava conclude that Lamaisa, the only time that I'm pater is if the bailim are present at the time of the she'ela. If they're not present at that time, I don't care if they're present at the shvura mesa. If they're present there, then I'm pater. So then the Gemara says, I'm not really understanding. Why is the moment of she'ela more important than the shvura umesa? That was what we concluded. That's how we touched up Rav Hamnuna. We rejected him. So as long as the bailim are there during the loan, so then what are we going to say? We're going to say that that I, the shomer, am pater, as long as the bailim were there at the moment of the loan. Says the Gemara, Eipuchano. Maybe we should reverse it. Maybe we should say that the most important moment for the bailim to be present is during the moment of the breaking of the animal's bone, or if the animal dies. Maybe that's a more important moment. Why are we seemingly ignoring the time that the bailim were present for the shvura mesa? Why is that less important than the bailim being there for the she'ela? So says the Gemara, Mistabra she'ela adifa mishum de kamaisi la l'rshusei. Says the Gemara, asvara, that the reason why we need the bailim to be present at the she'ela, for the shomer to be pater, is because that's when there's a transfer of ownership. The transfer of ownership takes place dafka at the she'ela. That's why we need the bailim present there. Says the Gemara, Adarabba. I easily could have argued the other way, that the moment of shvur omes is adifa. Why? Shekain chayiv be'onsen. Because we would have said that he's chayiv in onsen. This wasn't an ones. This isn't a pure ones. It's he's chayiv in the case of shvur omes, or he's pater when the bailim are there. It's he should be present for that. There's no reality of, there's no impact of the borrowing if nothing happens. So maybe perhaps we should say that the moment that's more important for the bailim to be present is the moment of the shvura mesa. So the Gemara says, no, we're 12 lines down on Sadi Bava Medalef. Ilo she'ela shvura mesa my avid. Without borrowing, shvura mesa is irrelevant. Obviously, the borrowing enabled the whole scenario. Says the Gemara, well, I could say the other way. If nothing happened to the animal, it was kind of a boring she'ela. Nothing really happened. The shvura mesa is the dramatic part. Says the Gemara, in conclusion, afilu hachi, even though one could argue that the shvura omesa moment is an important moment, still, she'ela adifa. Borrowing is a more powerful moment. Why? Because, says the Gemara, shekein chayv b'mezonoseh, because at that moment, the shoel becomes chayv in the mezonos. So that's kind of more of a telling moment. It's not just that there's a transfer of ownership. Pashut, that's true. But the moment where we see that now the shoel has to lay out cash, that's already a whole nother level. So if I borrow your cow, halacha l'maisa, I'm obligated in the mezonos. So that's why we say that the moment of she'ela is adifa. And that's why both Abaye and Rava agreed, even though they disagreed to how we got there, right? For Abaye and Rava to go from point A to point B, Rava went to the left and Abaye went to the right. But Lamaisa, they both got to the same place, and they agreed that when the pasuk says that if the bailim are present, that the shomer is pater by shvura mesa, that is true when the bailim were present at the she'ela. But if they're not present at the she'ela, then there's no patur. Rav Ashi gives a little bit of another answer. Rav Ashi Amar Kro. We have a pasuk state in Chumash. V'chiyishal ish me'imre ehu. If the person is with you, then you're pater. But that's at the moment of only if the shoal is present at the actual moment of the loan. I says the Gemara, Hachi bailav einimo ve'ein bailav imo lamali. If Rav Ashi is able to learn out from the pasuk of Yishal ish me'im re'ehu, if Rav Ashi is able to learn that out, that we need the bailam to be present at the moment of the she'ela, then why do we need the two psukim? Rav Ashi figured it out from one pasuk. Why do we need the pasuk that says that if the bailam are present, you're pater? If the bailam are not present, you're not pater. Rav Ashi was an efficiency seeker. He found the solution in one pasuk instead of two. So says the Gemara, Ilav Hanach, without having the psukim in Chav Beis Yud Gimel and Chav Beis Yud Dalet, the psukim of Bailav Imo and Ein Bailav Imo, Haba Amina, Hai Urcha Dekrahu. I might have thought that that's just the way that the Torah talks. It's not the way the Torah talks. The Torah typically speaks more efficiently, and therefore we're kind of doubling down. We have Rav Ashi, but we also have another pasuk that speaks out of character so that it teaches us what is the normal way for the Torah to talk. We're now going to have 8 questions in a row with no answers. Remember the sugya we're talking about. We're talking about the sugya of being pater. If I'm a shomer, I'm pater if the bailam are with me, if they were there b'shas she'ela. The Gemara says a third of the way down on Tzadi Vavam and Aleph as we head to the bottom of the page. Boy Rami Bar Chama. She'ela l'rava mahu. Halachically also. A person borrows an animal, they're very inappropriate, their taivas are out of control. They're borrowing an animal to sodomize the animal. So says the Gemara. If you do a she'ela like that, is your she'ela still a she'ela? Fascinating havamina. Who cares why I borrow an animal? If I borrow an animal, I borrowed an animal. So the Gemara gives the chakira. Do we say kedeshayle inshe ba'inan that in order to be a regular shoel, you have to borrow things for reasons that regular shoels borrow things? And ulahachi lo shayle inshe. This is not normal. It's just not normal. You don't borrow an animal for the isser of mishkevei.
The animal has.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's not even a question at that point. You're going to.
No, in Achanami, but are you a regular shoel with regular rules?
Difference is for sure going to be.
What?
If they're going to have to kill the animal.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure that's on his.
Look at Rashi. Rashi says halfway down, She'ela l'rava hu atzmo. So the guy himself is going to do that. Mahu mechayev be'onse olo. No. Yes, the animal is going to be killed. What if a different ones happens before the revia? Are you a shoel that you have classical guidelines? It's not about Pashat that's true. But we're asking about, let's say he rents the animal on a Tuesday. He rents the animal on a Tuesday. He wants to be rovea the animal on Thursday, and on Wednesday there's an ones. So we don't know if this is now like a quasi status of shoel, right? Is his she'ela status a she'ela status? So says the Gemara, do we say it has to be kedeshayli in odilma time of my mishum hana, that the reason why he wanted to borrow an animal was for his benefit, and usher or not, v'hai nami ha'isle hana. Okay, it's usher, but it's still a. Let's ask the question a little bit differently. If you borrow something from me, it's not my business what you do with it. So it's a regular she'el. Or do we say no? No. Maybe the limits of becoming a shoel have to be with the limits of normal. And therefore, because it's not normal to be rovea an animal, because it's an isser d'oraisa, so therefore, perhaps we should say it's not a she'ela. Next question. She'ela le'ra'os mahu. If you've ever been to Miami, sometimes you go to fancy hotels. They have extremely expensive cars in the roundabouts. They don't belong to the hotel. They ask people to park there because it makes the place look chashiv. So let's say I rent a cow so that I look wealthy. I rented your John Deere so that I look wealthy. I rented your car so that I look wealthy. Mamona ba'inan b'ha'ika. Do we say at the end of the day, okay, yeah, he's still renting something. This animal he's still borrowing something, and there's still monetary value. Odilma mamona de isle hana mine ba'inan. There has to be a benefit other than the fact that it has value. Veleka. Question number 3, halfway down, 7 lines before the wide lines. She'ela lasos ba'pachos mipruta ma'u. I'm going to borrow, but my return on the borrowing is less than a pruta. Do we say mamonan ba'inan ba'ika, that mamona ba'inan ba'ika? We need something of monetary value, and we can check that box. The animal has monetary value. Odilma, that we're talking not about the animal's cost, but the benefits that you gain from the animal. Odilma kol pachos mipruta lo klumi, that your she'ela, where you only benefit from half of a pruta, is a zero, and therefore you're not a shoel. Sha'al shtei paros lasos ben pruta mahu. I borrowed 2 cows from you, each one did a half. Mi amrinan zil basar shoel umashel v'ha'ika. Do we say we're looking at the shoel umashel, the structure, as it were, the wire frame of the borrowing? I'm a borrower and you're a lender, so therefore we have a she'ela. Odilma zil basar paros, we have to go after the animals and whatever financial gains they'll lead to. And therefore, neither of them are bringing in enough payment, and therefore it's not a loan. What about, this is our 5th question, 2 lines before the wide lines. Sha'al mishutfin v'nishal lo echad mehen. Let's say I borrow an animal from 2 shutfin, but I only am borrowing one of you. It's not a classic she'ela in that way. Do we say mahu? Do we say kula baila ba'inan v'haleka? Really, we need both bailim, and we don't have that because I only borrowed David. I didn't borrow Gerald. Odilma me'ahu palgadidei mia miftar. Or I could say at least there's a status of being pater from ones between me and David, because I rented David or I borrowed David, but I didn't borrow Gerald. We don't know. Odilma, or perhaps should we say Dilma Bahi Palga de Shaile Mia? Yeah, I said that. Mias Miftar. So if I borrow your animal, there's 2 owners, and I only borrow one of you. Do I need both of you to be pater, or can I be pater even with one of you? Next, our 7th question. Shal Meha Isha. Let's say you borrow from a woman, and these are her nichse malug. We've learned many times in Shas that the nichse malug are items that a woman brings into a marriage. Now, she really owns the principal cost of those items. The husband benefits from the payros of those items. So a woman brings in an orchard, she owns the orchard, he owns the fruit. So let's say that you borrow something from a woman, and v'nishal baila, and you borrow her husband. So do we say isha sheshala v'nishal ba'al mayo? How do we look at this? Kinyan payros ke kinyan aguf dami. Do we say that when you're kona the payros, when the husband is kona the payros, really the husband's only rights are the payros, but do we halachically look at that as kekinyan haguf dami, that it's as if he now owns those items, o dilma, o lo, or not? Next, the Gemara says, Amar le Ravina le Ravashi, ha'omer l'shlucho. If I say to my servant, so let's say there's Ploni Almoni who's my servant, say, v'hashel li im parasi, go, I want you to lend yourself out for me, including my cow, you, my shliach, and the cow. Mahu. Do we say bail of mamish ba'ina v'leka? A shliach is insufficient because the pasuk says be'alav. O dilma shlucho shel adam kamoso ve'ika. Fascinating. The pasuk says bailav, that the heter of me, the shomer, not having to pay is that I'm a baal, or that there's bailim with me. Or do we say that shlucho shel adam kamoso is a limit? Do we apply shlucho shel adam kamoso here? Yes or no? I do this at every bris. I did it this morning. I said to the dad, he was a little too anxious. It didn't go over so well. I'm like, Dad, look, I'm not allowed to circumcise your son. And his mouth was gaping open, like petrified. I'm like, don't worry, you can still appoint me as your messenger, right? There we say shlucho shel adam kamoso. I'm a shliach. I'm an extension of the hand of the father of the baby. This guy, bless his heart, he was a Zis guy, couldn't read a stitch of Hebrew, so I read the brachos for him. Fascinating shaila in the poskim. If the father doesn't know how to read Hebrew, if the father is a goy who reads the brachos, so the poskim right, should be the sandik or it should be the moel. Fascinating. Somebody asked me this past week, can the mother of the baby read the bracha? No, she has no chiyuv. She's not mechuyeves. So therefore, it's not, that's an inappropriate pathway. The right pathway is to have the sandik read it, or the moel. I never give it to the sandik. I just do it myself. It's easier. I got it down. It's just easier. I'm not saying I'm right. I'm just saying what I do. So when we say that the bailam are present and therefore the shoel is pater, is that true only for the bailam themselves, or is it true even in the case of shlichus? So the Gemara says in regards to a couple of these cases, Amar le Ravacha bered Rav Avya le Ravashi. Oi. It's okay. We're going to stop here. We'll pick up at this question again tomorrow so that everyone can make Mariv. We'll stop here. We will catch up tomorrow, Mir Hashem. Wishing you all a beautiful night.